Okay, I apologize for anybody watching the recording where I just read in the Hebrew verses 4 through 7 of Judges chapter 16, and I'm up to the commentary now on page 280. And I apologize for not for those watching that I didn't turn this on sooner. I'm not sure. It might have been the conversation we were having before about Shabbos wheelchairs that distracted me. Um, okay, and if you're watching on Zoom and weren't part of this, you can ask anybody who's on the Zoom screen what I'm talking about with a Shabbos wheelchair. Okay, it has been pointed out within the comment on wherein his great strength lies, it has been pointed out that Samson is never described as a giant, which made his strength appear the more remarkable. All right, so he's an average sized guy with supernatural strength. To afflict him. This was a promise that they would not kill him, which they kept since they only blinded him. Even Delilah would not betray Samson to such an extent to endanger his life. Well, we're not sure about that. They didn't offer, we want to kill him. They offered, we want to capture him. We will give. The pointing of the verb is unusual, being the third person singular masculine of the Nifal conjunction. Nitan lach. I will just say grammatically that's right, but I'm not sure offhand what the form should be. Okay. Every one of us, each of the 5 Philistine overlords promised her payment. How do they know it was 5? So we're not told that it's 5 who came. It just says plural overlords. So why the comment thinks it's 5, I don't know. 6, tell me, it is to be presumed that her question was not asked abruptly, but she gradually worked up to it, right? Because they told her to seduce him. So they leave out, the narrator leaves out how she seduced him until she asked the question. Is it how she dressed? Was it with food and wine? The story earlier in the book of Judges about Yael and Sisera with the tent peg in Sisera's head, that was with milk. So that's to get him to go to sleep. So we don't know. Nevertheless, it's impossible to believe that Samson was so stupid as not to have his suspicions aroused. One of his weaknesses was his excessive self-assurance. He felt he could amuse himself at her expense as long as he pleased. He tried once too often. Okay, so, and then verse 7. 7, that is 7 bowstrings. 7, a magical number. Fresh, in that condition, they would be tough and more firmly tied into knots. Bowstrings, either cords made from intestines of animals or from moist, flexible branches. Right, so bowstrings, violin strings, other stringed instruments, classical stringed instruments, those strings are made from, or could be, I don't know, Barry, you would know, you play the guitar. Are guitar strings synthetic now, or are they still made from animal? They are synthetic. Okay, but so they used to be made from animal products. Yes, Bess?
Bow and arrow, the arrow.
Oh, that kind of bowstring. Yeah, that would be the same thing, right? What can you use that can provide the strength when you stretch it out? As any other man, literally as one of the ordinary men. Okay, so let's read altar on this. On page 189. He loved a woman in Nahal Sorek. In this climactic episode in the series of 3 women with whom Samson is involved, we're told that he actually loves the woman, and of the three, only Delilah is given a name. Nahal Sorek, Wadi of the Vine, is in Israelite territory, and Delilah may well be an Israelite woman. Okay, so is it a Philistine name? It's still possible it's a Philistine name, that Israelite men and women could take up Philistine names because of the interaction between the Israelites and the Philistines, but so we don't know. He doesn't add any more to that. The Philistine overlords, the term Seranim, always appears in the plural and is the title of the rulers of the 5 towns that make up the Philistine Pentapolis. So that maybe that's why in our edition that we're reading from, it says 5 overlords, maybe 1 for each of the 5 cities that make up Philistines, like Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and I forget what the 2 others are, it doesn't matter. Many scholars think it's a cognate with Greek tyrannos. The fact that the overlords themselves should come to make the appeal to Delilah reflects the importance they attach to the capture of this deadly Israelite adversary. Bind him to torture him. They are frank about their brutal intentions toward Samson. Instead of killing him on the spot, they want him rendered helpless so that they can torment and abuse this despised enemy who has wreaked such havoc among them. 1,100 silver shekels, this is a vast sum, 5,500 shekels all told, and so more than enough to appeal to her mercenary impulses. With what would you be bound to be tortured? In repeating the words of the overlords, Delilah does not hesitate to speak openly of torture. Presumably, she is putting this to Samson as a merely hypothetical condition, though the talk of binding and torture also makes this sound like a perverse sex game they are playing. Okay, so, when you're an academic in the ivory tower, your imagination runs amok, and I don't know if I were writing a commentary here where I would have dared to write something like that in a commentary that's going to be published. Okay, it says more about altar than about the possibility of what was going on. Okay, so I'm just saying, I'm saying this with a smile, but I can imagine people who would be tremendously offended by him saying something like this. Okay, just putting that out there. I never read this before. This is the first time I'm seeing this, and what my reaction to this is. Okay, and I was talking a little bit myself about how, they asked her to seduce him, and the text of Judges doesn't provide the detail of the seduction. So it leaves it to our imagination. Here, altar is adding something quite imaginative. That might be an image now that might be hard not to undo. Okay. Now, and he goes on with this, like it says bowstrings, and he says moist thongs. Okay, so in his translation, if they were to bind me with 7 moist thongs that had not been dried out. These are either animal tendons or cords plaited from leather, in either case still moist, so that they are very hard to tear apart. Okay, so that's all he has there, and that was more than enough to pique our interest. Okay,
Now
verse 8. Yes.
Now I know why Barry likes altar so much.
Okay, enough said. Let's not continue this. Okay, verse 8. Vaya'alula sarnei flishtim shiv'a yetarim lachim asher lo choravu v'ta'asrehu bahem. So the overlords, the Philistine overlords, came to her with 7 bowstrings, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Okay, so she just happened to have then, like, I don't know, what are the details of the story here? Like, he said to her, well, if you get 7 moist, wet, undried bowstrings and tie me up, then I'll be just like a regular guy. And so she happens to take them out. What, Bess?
It says that the Lords gave them to her.
Right. So, okay. So what's the process here? And where's Samson in the time? Like, does he see the overlords giving her the bowstrings so that now he knows what's going on, like he couldn't figure it out before? Yeah. So there's some details here. Yes, Barbara.
They don't give you a timeline, how long it, from the
Right.
time that he says it to the time. that she
Exactly.
actually
There's
says
no
it.
timeline, and there are other details of the story that are missing, which is what we've seen from a lot of the Samson stories so far, that a lot of details are missing. Okay? So it just means that the book of Judges doesn't care about the details of the story, the events themselves. What matters is the bottom line. Okay? 9. V'ha'arev Yoshev la b'cheder. So what is this English word? Now she had liers. Now she had liars in wait. Okay. V'ha'orev Yoshev la b'cheder v'tomer elav plishtim alecha Shimshon v'yinatek et hayetarim ka'asher yinatek ptil haneoret baharicho esh velo noda kocho. So she had liars in wait in the room, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he broke the bowstrings as a string of tow is broken, that's how to pronounce it, T-O-W, is broken when it touches the fire. And so his strength was not known. So he just said, if you tie me up with 7 bowstrings, I won't have the strength. And now he's able to break through them as if it was nothing. Okay? Yes, Bess?
Really unbelievable. Liars in Wait, Liers in Wait,
Yeah.
were a Gothenburg, Swedish-based death metal band active between 1990.
Okay.
They got it
Googled
from-
liars in wait. Okay, that's interesting. Yes. All right, let's read the commentary on these 2 verses. Bound him while he was awake, abiding, that is these liars await, liars in waiting. They did not come out even after he was bound, but waited to see whether the cords would hold. Touches literally smells. So let's read the English translation in Alter.
Excuse me, in your version, it says bound him while he was awake.
Yeah, yes.
In ours, it says sleeping.
Okay.
I like awake better.
Yeah. So in Alter, and the Philistine overlords brought up to her 7 moist thongs that had not been dried out, and she bound him with them. And the ambush was laid out in her chamber. That makes more sense. The word orave there doesn't really sound like a plural to begin. It's not a plural word. And why the English translation has liars in wait, I don't know. So it makes more sense the way Alter is translating it. And the ambush was laid out in her chamber, and she said to him, Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he snapped the cords as the wick of TOW. Is that tow or toe? I don't know, some kind of animal fat. Okay? Snaps when it touches fire. And the secret of his power was not known. That's the idea, right? That is, he said to her, it's these 7 bowstrings. So now we don't know what the source of his strength is, because he he broke through them. Okay? And so the only comment we have in altar below the line, when it touches fire, the fire motif returns in the simile. Okay, so in other words, there's lots of fire that appears in the Samson stories, and here's fire again. Okay, 10. Vatomer Delilah el Shimshon, hine hetalta bi, vatidaber elai kezavim, ata hagidana li, bameh teaser. So Delilah says to Samson, you mocked me, and you spoke lies to me. Now, tell me, please, what can restrict you or bind you? 11. Vayomer eleha im asor ya'asruni ba'avotim chadashim asher lo na'asa vahem melacha v'chaliti v'hayiti ke'achad ha'adam. And he said to her, if you were to really bind me with new ropes, which have not been used for work, then I would become weak or become sick, and I would be like any other man. 12. Vatikach Delilah avotim chadashim, vata'asrehu vahem, vatomer elav plishtim alecha Shimshon, v'ha'orev yoshev bechader, va'yenatkem me'al zrootav kachut. So she took, now remember the first version with the bowstrings, the overlords gave her the bowstrings. Now the overlords aren't there to give her the ropes. Delilah takes the new ropes, and she binds him with them. And she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And the ambush was waiting in the room, and he broke them from his arms like thread. Okay, let's read up to there. From verse 10 down below, 10 to 12. New ropes made of 3 strands, wherewith no work had been done, defining new. If they had been put to use, they would have lost their strength. Like a thread used in sewing, which can easily be broken asunder. Okay? And altar only adds, Delilah took new ropes. Here the aid of the Philistine overlords is not mentioned, though it may be implied. Okay, so, altar just likes to keep in mind the literary structure. And I pointed that out too, that the Philistines were missing there from giving her the ropes. 13. Vatomer Delilah el Shimshon, ad hena hetalta bi, vatedaber elai kezavim. Hagidali bameh te'aser, vayomer eleha, im ta'argi et sheva machlefot roshi im ha-masachet, vatitka ba-yated, vatomer elav, plishtim alecha Shimshon, vayikatz mishnato, vayisa et ha-yetad, ha-ereg ve'et ha-masachet. So, Delilah said to Samson, until now, you mocked me and spoke lies. Tell me now how to bind you. And he said to her, if you were to weave 7 locks of my head with the web, not sure what that means, and she fastened it with a pin, but the yated, this is also a tent peg, like reminding us of the Sisera story in the beginning. So it's the same word Yated. Here it's translated as pin. There it was the tent peg. So she fastened it with a pin and said to him, Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he woke out of his sleep, and he plucked the pin of the beam and the web. So again, the ereg here is in verse 14 is like the word ta'argi in verse 13. So why is it here translated as beam and there weave? So he took the pin out of the weaving and the web. So he's able to do that. So he lied again about his strength, but he's getting to it because he mentioned his hair. Right? Remember, his strength is from being a Nazirite. So 15, Vatomer elav, Ech tamar ahavtich, velibacha ein iti, ze shalosh pa'amim heital tabi, velo higadatali, bameh kochacha gadol. So she says to him, how can you say, I love you, and your heart is not with me? Because 3 times you mocked me and didn't tell me how your strength is so great. Okay, so now she gets into the truth of the matter. If you really love me, you'd tell me what the source of your strength is. Okay, so is he going to succumb to this romantic threat? 16, Vayehi, ki heitzika lo vidavareha, kol hayamim, vate'al tsehu, vatiktsar nafsho lamut. And so it was that she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul or his body was vexed unto death. Like every day, she said, you don't love me. You're not telling me your source of strength. Every day. How many days is she doing this? But every day, she's saying this to him. If you really loved me, you tell me your source of strength. 17. Vayaged la et kolibo, vayomer la, mora lo Allah al roshi, ki nazir Elohim ani mi beten imi. Im gulachti v'sar mimeni chochi v'chaliti v'hayiti kechol ha'adam. And he told her all his heart. And he said to her, a razor has not been on my head, because I am a Nazirite to God, or of God, from the womb, from my mother's womb. If I were to be shaved, then my strength would leave me, and I would be weak, and I would be like every other man. 18. Vatera dilila, ki higidla et kolibo, vatishlach, vatikra, lissarne flishtim lemor, alu hapa'am, ki higidli. It's supposed to be read as li, even though it looks like la, lamed hey, because she is talking. So she's talking in the first person, not in the third person. La means to her, li means to me. So that's why it should be read as to me. Ki higidli et kolibo, va'alu eleha sarne flishtim, va'ya'alu hakesef biyadam. So Delilah saw that he was telling her his heart. Like she knew he was telling the truth this time. And she went or sent for and called the Philistine overlords, saying, come up now, because he told me everything in his heart. And the Philistine overlords came to her, and they brought the money with them. vateyashnehu al birkeha, vatikra laish, vategalach et sheva machlafot rosho, vatachel la'anoto, vayasar kocho me alav. She made him fall asleep on her knees. However you want to picture that, imagine how Alter might picture it, but he made her fall asleep on her knees, and she called someone, and she shaved the 7 locks of hair of his head, and she began to afflict him or to torture him, and his strength left him. We'll read to the end of the page. Vatomer plishtim alecha Shimshon, vayekatz mishnato, vayomer etze kefa'am befa'am, ve'ina er. Vehu lo yada ki Adonai sar me alav. She said, Philistines are on you, Samson. And he woke up from his sleep and said, I will go out as other times, and I will shake myself. And he didn't know that God left him. Not that his strength left him, but God left him. Vayochazuhu Philishtim, vayenakru et enav, vayoridu oto azata, vayeasruhu banechushtaim, vayehi tochein bevet haasirim, or haasurim. Bevet ha'asurim. So the Philistines grabbed him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him in fetters of brass, and he became a grinder in the prison. In the prison house. So there must have been some kind of mill, and he, with his hands bound, or no, I don't know if it's his hands, could have been his legs, bound in these fetters, he became a grinder. What else is a blind man supposed to do? Vayachel se'ar rosho litzameach ka'asher gulach. And the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaved. Okay, so it's just interesting how evil Delilah was, that she was, for the sake of money, was able to convince him, seemingly out of love, to or constantly bombarding him and nudging him every single day until he finally gave in and told her the truth. And then the Philistines had their way with him. So let's read from the, I think we left off at verse 13, back to 281. The web, the woven cloth with which she interwove his hair. The apodosis of the sentence, though unexpressed, is obvious. I'm not sure what an apodoisis of the sentence, though unexpressed, is obvious. Not sure what that means, but somehow, I don't know, we're supposed to understand that the weaving of the hair might look like a web. Okay. Fastened it, that is, she fastened the piece of weaving in the loom to prevent its slipping out, weaving his hair into her work as she would do with ordinary threads. Web, the cloth with which his hair had been woven. Heart, the word is not employed here in the sense of affection, but signifies what resides in the heart, namely, according to Hebrew psychology, thought. So, nefesh, the word nefesh, in modern Hebrew means soul, but in biblical Hebrew means body. Lev, in biblical Hebrew, or rabbinic Hebrew, means mind. In modern Hebrew means heart. So it could be either way, like in his mind or in his heart. Yes, Bess?
We're saying that she was bad.
Yeah.
She was an evil woman. Is it possible we're looking at it from the other way? Maybe he had taken her and she was kidnapped and forced as a.
Okay, this is a way out. Sure. Maybe. Yeah, we could understand it that way. And somehow she's able to get out with money as opposed to just running for her life. Yes. Yeah, we could understand that.
She's a single woman.
Yeah.
No mention of a tribe or father.
Yeah. Delilah just isn't looked favorably in rabbinic literature, and usually it's not a name for nice Jewish girls.
I agree, but I'm just saying that we're all.
I understand that. But the way we traditionally understand the story is through the lens of the rabbis and how the rabbis read the story. So it's very hard to take off that lens and read it from a new lens. Okay, that's all I'm saying. So, yeah, I think, though, that it's not, I don't think the story presents their being together as a negative. In other words, there's another woman in the story who's a prostitute.
No, she's a prostitute as well.
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that Delilah's a prostitute. It just said he loved a woman in Nachal Serek, and her name is Delilah. It doesn't say that she's a prostitute.
Oh, okay. I was reading the wrong one.
Right, it was an unnamed woman before. That's when he took the gates of the doors of the city of Gates of Gaza on his back. So that's a prostitute. So that's an unnamed prostitute. This one she's named. So I don't know. I hear you, Bess, and yes, we could read it that way. It's just that the story doesn't present itself in a way in which she seems to be in this relationship against her will. Okay, 16, was vexed, literally shortened, sick to death. All his heart he revealed his secret knowledge. If I be shaven, not that his strength lay in his hair, but as long as the symbol of his sacred calling remained, the divine gift with which he had been endowed would be with him. All his heart, this time she instinctively felt that he had spoken the truth. And some authorities are of the opinion that she inferred the veracity of his statement from the fact that he mentioned God's name in connection with it. Yeah, that could be. 283. A man. The Hebrew means the man, the agent specifically appointed by the Philistine lords to shave him, that is, and had shaven off. The text reads, and she shaved off, which Mitzudat David explains as she ordered the man to shave off. The usage is common in the Bible. See the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, which means that he gave orders to build it. Okay, just because it says that she shaved him doesn't mean that she literally shaved him. She could have given the order for somebody else to do it. Go out without restriction, shake myself to get rid of the drowsiness of sleep. But modern expositors prefer the explanation from his bonds. Nothing, however, is mentioned of Samson being tied up in any way on this occasion, so they suppose that this was done to discover whether his strength had been sapped. Like, in other words, he's waking up, he feels different, so he tries to shake it off, and it's not feeling different. He knew not, either because he was not fully awake and did not realize the change that had taken place in him, or he hoped that, despite the cutting of his hair, God would not abandon him. Put out, literally bored, a form of mutilation common in ancient times. That is, gouged out. His eyes, the rabbis remark that the eyes are the agents of sin. Samson's eyes had lusted after Philistine women, and that part of his body suffered punishment. Now it's interesting that this is the third time that the commentary is referring to SOT.9b. So that's Tractate Sota, and Sota is the tractate of the whole ceremony of a man who thinks his wife or accuses his wife of adultery or infidelity. And there's a whole ceremony that the Torah talks about in the book of Numbers, and there's a whole tractate talking about it. So infidelity, and so the story of Samson then might be appropriate to bring forward and the rabbis explaining it in that tractate, because how the heart can be seduced. Okay, fetters. The Hebrew noun has the dual form, perhaps denoting that they were fastened to his hands and feet. He did grind. The Philistines humiliated him by imposing upon him work normally performed by slave women. Okay, let's read Alter on this. So we're on 190:13. If you weave my head's 7 tresses together with the web. Only now do we learn how Samson wears his uncut hair, and one should note the magical number 7. In a third of his 3 false explanations, he edges toward the real secret because his hair is involved. This version also comes close to his actual predicament because it conjures up entanglement in a woman's instrument, the loom. And drive them with a peg into the wall, I would be weakened and become like any man. Both these clauses are absent in the Masoretic text, which is manifestly incomplete here, but they appear in the Septuagint, the Greek translation, in the Targum Yonatan, an Aramaic translation, and in the Peshitta, a language called Syriac, which is the Peshitta is the Samaritan Bible. So these are all ancient texts that biblical scholars use to help understand cryptic passages in the Bible. And she drove them with a peg into the wall. Into the wall supplied from the Septuagint. The driving of the peg recalls Yael and Sisera, but in this instance, the woman's deadly intent is not realized. On 191, you only say, I love you. She uses the same feminine argument as Samson's first wife. 3 times now. The folk tale pattern of 3 times, in this case 3 times with a 4th time that swerves to a new outcome, is made an object of deliberate intention. The story as a whole is organized around 3s, 3 women, and the multiples of 3 killed by Samson. All that was in his heart, literally all his heart. She put him to sleep on her knees. This, of course, necessary so that his hair can be cut, but it's also a powerful image of the seductive woman lulling the mighty hero and reducing him to a baby in her lap. Called the man and shaved his head 7 tresses. The verb shaved is conjugated in the feminine. Some amend it to a masculine form. Others claim with little philological warrant that it means caused him to be shaved. It makes more sense to assume that Delilah, who can't very well move with Samson asleep on her knees, calls the man to bring her a razor so that she can then shave Samson's head. Her performance of the act herself is thematically and psychologically apt. The seductress cuts away the source of Samson's potency. She began to torture him. She's the very first to torment him in an inappropriately sadistic move. 192, as all the other times, the times motif recurs here. The Hebrew kifam bifam doubles the word time. Gouged out his eyes, a Freudian would see an upward displacement of castration in this act, but it should be noted that these were the eyes that saw the women who led to all the trouble. Gouging out the eyes was also a punishment for a rebellious vassal. Compare the blinding of Zedekiah by the Babylonians, 2 Kings 25. Okay, it's 10:26. Let's stop here. We'll read the rest of the story next time. So wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and have a good rest of the day. Take care.
Shalom. Thank you.